Get your kaiju figures at Big Bad Toy Store. You can check them out at the link in the description. Dragon Ball, horror, kaiju, and more. Steven's Toy Reviews. Hey there, collectors, it's going to be Steven here, and welcome to another Ultraman review. I haven't done one of these in quite some time, and thanks to Big Bad Toy Store, I am able to bring you a review of the SH Figuarts Eleking. Tamashii Nations is looking to tackle this kaiju yet again, and many years ago they released the Ultra Act 1, which I did happen to review. Now we do have an SH Figuarts version on the market, and folks are wondering if this is going to be worth picking up. Effectively, we could consider this a renewal all these years later, and considering we do have some Showa SH Monster Arts figures on the market now, is this going to be a 1-for-1, a 2-for-2? Is this going to be worth picking up an upgraded version of Eleking, or should you stick with your original? At about $85 or so at US MSRP, there are going to be some folks who are wondering if this is going to be worth the investment. So of course, that's why I'm here. Let's take a look to see whether or not Eleking is going to be worth adding into your collection. When it comes to sculpt and paint, realistically speaking, the only thing that I could see that may be a bit off-putting is going to be the brushing on the figure when it comes to more so the black, gray airbrushing. I guess you may say. You're most prominently going to see that on Eleking's back and on the tail. Some I could see saying that it's a bit too much, but otherwise I think the figure looks fantastic, and I'm going to try to speak in this section to make sure that I get all of the points not only talked about, but up on the screen, because the figure just looks great. So on the, is that a mouth area where Eleking would normally shoot his beam, depending on the iteration, that is going to have some translucent plastic, and it looks really nice. It's textured. It's not just going to be a straight piece of translucent plastic. You can see a whole bunch of little dots and ridges in there, which looks great. We do have the antennae or motors or whatever you would prefer for the parts on Eleking's head, the ears, if you will. Those are nice looking as well, and they're masked wonderfully when it comes to the transition for the different paint apps. Throughout Eleking, you are going to find more than one paint. I guess we can agree to call this sort of like a cream beige color throughout Eleking, and it's not just going to be one. There are going to be different shades alongside the black shading that is found on the figure too. When it comes to the sculpt on Eleking, of course, we are going to have some creases and folds here and there, but for the black, I guess the best way to communicate it, cow-like pattern on Eleking, that features an entire different texture profile as well. So it's not just like they took an easy way out here, it genuinely looks very nice. On the back of Eleking, we do have a nice stripe going down with some dotted pattern there, and then taking a look at the tail, it does actually have a cohesive fluid sculpt to it, which you may mistake for just something that looks a bit more chaotic and random, but that will be mostly because you are twisting and turning the tail around over time, and that will break up the sculpt a bit more. Of course, it is divided up because of the articulation cut, but if you do line everything up, it does form a nice, complete fluid sculpt. So in terms of sculpt and paint, accuracy, not necessarily going to comment on too much, because pinpoint the exact suit or episode this is based off of, it's going to be the one where he makes his appearance initially. But I think that this figure looks good, and I think that's sort of like a crossroads where we can talk about what really makes an action figure look good between if it just simply looks good by itself, or if it has to have accuracy. And then at this point, I think it's a good time to transition over to articulation, which Eleking is wow. They've got all the bells and whistles here for Eleking. What I will say is that you do have to be careful with the tail over time. I don't think the tail is inherently going to be an issue as it stands now, because you can kind of see even gravity is supporting that loop, and it's not really going to be an issue. However, if you put some force into it, then the tail will give. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But like I sort of touched base on, we do have our ears, which do swivel around. So both of them do that. They do spin, not a big deal. We do have a multi-joint neck system that are going to be ball joints. And Eleking, I mean, look at the range of movement there. Looking up, looking down, rocking from side to side, and that's just that head joint. So then when you factor in all of the other joints in the neck, I mean, that's just insane. Like, that is just like a tail in and of itself, right? So that's amazing. Shoulders, they're kind of like in the body. Ball joint. So Eleking can T-pose, right? We do get rocking motion. Basically, we're going to get a double hinge elbow. I mean, I think this is going to be like the ball joint kind of shenanigans they do in the SH Monster Arts line, where we kind of have a ball joint here and then a ball joint here. But, you know, effectively, we do get hinge movement and then ball jointed wrists. So the arms move well enough. Also, ball jointed ab crunch. And then I'm going to make a comment. All right? So that's good. Ball jointed waist. I will need to talk about the hips. Now, when it comes to the torso, this upper portion, like the chest area, and the bottom portion are made of a softer plastic. So as you're moving things around, as I wiggle the tail and it doesn't drop, you will be able to push a few parts of the figure a little bit beyond the normal range. So this way you're not going to break anything, which is nice. Now, you may notice that I'm kind of struggling just a little bit here in some spots, and there's a little bit of a gap, which isn't an issue. Down here, this is an issue that sometimes comes up with some kaiju figures, okay? The hips are going to be ball jointed, and they are going to be double axis or barbell style. And look at that. Wow. Eleking can kick off to the side, like to do the splits, no big deal, and kick forward and back. You are going to have to fiddle with the hips a bit in the ball joints in order to really get that going, because they're kind of cut at an angle, like going out like that. So it can be a little bit frustrating if you're not able to get in there and get a good look, which you can do that to get in there, but then that leads up to a point. If you do that, then the midsection of Eleking is now tucked in and is blocking the thigh. So when you go to move this, keep in mind that this section of Eleking will be blocking the articulation. You already saw me move the knees around, which are basically going to be like the elbows, ball joints, but they basically work like hinges. The ankles, which are going to be ball joints, twist and turn and rock. And then every single cut here is going to be a ball joint. And I mean, look at that. Fantastic movement. That pops off, but for a reason. Okay. There we go. Eleking has a tail accessory. I mean, when it comes to articulation, Eleking is fantastic. And it really makes you, it dinks the finger, right? As the saying goes. When you have a figure which is basically a glorified tail with limbs, right? Eleking's an eel. Anyway, when you have this sort of setup, it does make you wonder when we take a look at things like the Monster Arts King Ghidorahs, and then we have some issues with like Godzilla tails and so on. Makes you wonder why. Anyway, Eleking here for this release only has one accessory. And based off of the promo images and so forth, you look at 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you pop it off. Just like that. See? No big deal. And it is the tail wrap part. Which, same paint apps, same sculpted detail. And you'll see it in action with another character at the end. But there you go. And that's about that. So, you can put any character you want in there who will fit. Unfortunately, I do not have Super 7 available, but I got Ultraman. And literally, all he does is just boop, slide in. So you can have him in distress any way you want. You know, you can have Eleking looking back at it as he shocks, which, that's it for the accessories. Now, thinking back on the previous Eleking release, specifically the Ultra Act, it's a bit disappointing because, okay, so the Showa era, you know, we didn't really have all the super goofy powers that all of the kaiju may eventually have in the series, right? But there really isn't much else that we get here that like let's say the Ultra Act did come with, whether it's going to be a beam, whether it's going to be the baby Eleking, or at least some electric parts, some lightning or anything to that effect. It would have been neat if there was some sort of just even electric parts that we could have put around the tail for this figure. Now, we do have the Tamashii effect lightning, or thunder, whichever one it is, the lightning effect, which you can get. And you can kind of finagle it so this way you can have a character getting shocked if you wanted. Or if you do have the Ultra Act Eleking, it shouldn't be an issue sort of cannibalizing those parts, I assume would be the right words. But nevertheless, it's kind of upsetting that we don't have something like that here. Another note that I just realized is that it sort of is promoted that the curved tail piece is bendable, bendy wire implication. I just want to make it very clear that yes, I took off an extra part there. You can move this around, right? But it wants to naturally go back to that curved state. So you're not going to be like tightening it up. It has a pre-posed form. This is not going to be like the Figuarts Gulza, which had a bendy wire in it, and there were some reports of breakage. So it looks like they did happen to correct that here. But keep your eyes out regarding Figuarts Gulza on the channel. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on over to a size comparison so you can get an idea of how big Eleking is going to be. Like I did make mention, I do not have Ultra 7 at this time. And likewise, I have reduced the size of my Ultraman collection. I'm more so only going to be having some kaiju in mind. I am sort of refocusing my collection, but I think what I'm able to show you here is going to be a nice range of different figures with maybe Godzilla sort of as an anchor, if you will, so you get an idea of how big Eleking is going to be. And I think this one will just fit in fine enough with any 6-inch scale kaiju collection. So buy now, skip, or wait for a deal. What I will say is, once again, the sticker shock of about $85 for somebody who is maybe not a diehard Ultraman fan, well, yeah, that can be a bit intimidating. I will say that this thing looks phenomenal. The articulation is definitely something to be envied by other kaiju product line from Tamashii Nations. The only real downside is going to be the accessories, which unfortunately there could maybe have been some more stuff added in that we did not get. But when you really factor in the core product that we have here, if you are thinking, yeah, $85 is fine, but is the figure good? Well, go ahead, add it to your cart, and check out. Eleking is going to be a winner.